Hello, guys. So it's me, just George, broadcasting for Super Geeks. I had an idea after talking to my good friend, Mr. Kitwalski. There's a lot of people that are speculating on different podcasts about, and we don't always have time to go over all these theories because we try to condense our schedule on the regular show so that, we talk about this and we talk about that and we don't go over 2 hours. Well, sometimes theories come up and you don't have time to really get into it on our show because we have a large panel. So I figured sometimes I want to get an idea across after talking to people that may, make it into a mini show or just a solo thing. All right. So the idea is that in this particular solo thing I'm doing right now, I have a theory. Now, what that theory is pretty simple. It's about what's going on with the United Federation of Planets in Discovery Season 3 based on what information we have in the trailer. And there's a lot of stuff you can sort of take from that trailer, and you can say, well, let me figure out what's going on. Well, here's the thing. What is going on? And the thing that's going on, in my opinion, is what I'm about to talk about. So I was talking to Kitwalski. We were sitting there chit-chatting in the chat, as you do. And I noticed a few things, and I'm going to share some things with you guys. So I was watching him and this other guy in Trek. I forget the name of that show. Anyways, it was one of Kitwalski's many podcasts that he does. And they were doing a thing where they were talking about what could be going on in the future. Lore Reloaded. That was the name of the podcast. Sorry, I had a brain fart. And I was watching it, and I was like, and I gave him some shit. I said, look, I like some of your theories, but one of them I don't agree with is it has to connect to a past show like Picard and all that. Because it's 930 years from the time of Discovery, which is like 700 and something from the time of Picard. So if you think about history, the Roman Empire lasted for one of the longest, as far as we know, is one of the longest lasting civilizations in the world. It was 1,000 years, but to last 1,000 years, they had to keep changing their form of government. They had to go from a republic to an empire to a republic to an empire, back and forth until they finally gave in to things like the Christianity. And even then, after a while, they finally fell. But it took a lot. They kept changing their ways. And one of the things that made the Roman Empire fall was how far they expanded beyond their reach of influence until finally it collapsed. They couldn't sustain how far they had reached. My personal theory, and this is not the actual basis for this, but I'm just throwing this out there, is that if you can get almost 1,000 years out of any government in space, you did a good job. I don't care whether it was an alien invasion or your government collapsed from in, you did a damn good job. To be able to sustain any kind of a galactic level, if you think about how big that is, society for almost 1,000 years is commendable. So anyone that thinks that it's a failure, I'm going to give you guys the middle finger if you think that. Because, and seriously, if the Federation lasted with its ideals for that long, or even like 700 years, that's amazing on that scale. So that set aside, I have a few ideas about what could be going on based on what we have seen in the trailer. The trailer didn't offer everything, but I think it gave a lot of clues. And a lot of people are kind of pointing out things that people like Kitwalski and Lore Reloaded are showing. And I'll show you guys one quick example. Hang on one second, because I kind of have to use Zoom on my own. So share. I'm going to show this. Share. Okay. So if you guys look at what you're looking at right now, which is, sorry. Let me do this again. Share this thing. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. That's why. Give me 1 second, guys. Sorry about that. This thing. Okay. So there we go. Okay. So if you look at this, look at that. I think it's a girl, but it could be a guy in that access way of the Discovery. Now, this is, I could zoom up, but it won't really give that much detail. Kitwalski and did a video where he zoomed in on the uniform, and I'm not going to get into that. What I will say is that uniform is, I agree with him that that's probably the current closest thing to the Federation in this time period, because they seem to be the most organized out of all the disenfranchised factions. And they seem to be trying to sabotage something, like they're expecting Discovery. Now, that's just a theory, of course. But here's my reason for posting this this thing I'm doing right now. I think personally that Earth, if you look at the flag, there's originally 13 planets in the original flag of the United Federation of Planets, according to all the wikis, Memory Alpha. We don't have 13 nameable planets. We did see in the final episode of Enterprise, even though it was a holographic recreation, everybody forgets Rigelia. But the ones I can remember that may be part of that is I named off Earth, Vulcan, Andoria, Tellar, Rigelia, and possibly Cations. And all the rest are like, they might be leaving them nebulous so that they can fill that in later. But the idea is there were 13 founding planets, and right now there are 6 left. My new theory, after talking to my friend Kitwalski, is Earth is the ones that pulled out. And that if you think about it, if you're the founding planet that rallied everybody together to fight the Romulans, and you made them all agree, and like Archer, you went into the negotiation, you said, we got to work together, guys, just like Sheridan on Babylon 5. And you said, we got to fight for a common cause, and this is what creates the United Federation of Planets. If that meant, and you've seen other examples of shows, such as Future Tense, which is the episode where they found a ship, Enterprise found a ship that it was bigger on the inside, like Doctor Who, right? And it was from the 31st century, I think. And when Dr. Phlox did an autopsy on the one survivor, okay, he pointed out to Archer, he said, is he human? And he said, he's made up of a lot of different genetic codes, which is, basically saying we interbreed over the next 1,000 years with a lot of species. Now, remember something else. Archer asked Daniels point blank, are you human? When he found out that he was from the future. And Daniels' answer to that was, more or less. My theory, if you look at the episode Demons, which was the actual canonical final 2-parter for Enterprise, which is showing that everybody was afraid of us intermixing with the future. They said their biggest fear was Trip and T'Pol's kid. That was their biggest fear. Will we lose our human genetics by going out there and intermixing? Well, if you look at the politics today, and you realize that Star Trek has always tried to include what's going on right now. It's always been that way. If you look at, and I'm not using this as a thing to say anything about Trump. Take his name out of the equation. What's going on with the administration? What's going on? We pulled out of the UN Accords. We basically said, we don't want to be in this group. We also want to build a wall. Now, again, I'm not trying to get political here, but it's just a fact. If you look at how Trek has always tried to address these things, okay, and you look at what Discovery might be trying to show in the future. So the Federation has already shown from what we've seen that when they first got formed, they were very worried about this possibility that we will lose our racial identity. If you look at what we're seeing in this trailer and you look at all the clues, I think there's a trail of breadcrumbs to say, I think, in my opinion, that what we're going to see happen is when Burnham shows up and sees the future, there are 6 planets on that flag now. 6. There were 13 in the original flag. I think the minute that Earth pulled out, it was just like what happened on Babylon 5 when Night's Watch was all worried about humans losing their way. It's a common theme. The idea of the universal racism that it's not about that we don't want to embrace other races, it's that we're going to lose something of ourselves. And when you think about what Phlox said to Archer and how humans, and then Daniels, is there such a thing as a human being in the future? Even though it's almost 1,000 years in the future, can you not think of the possibility, or you cannot entertain the possibility that Earth might start to, at some point, say, some person will rise up and say, all the genetics are showing out there that we have lost the human identity. We need to close off, withdraw, and somebody rises up, some political figure. It doesn't mean there's a big war. It doesn't mean that the Borg did something. It could just be a charismatic leader that says, we are in danger. We have spread out so far and so thin as a federation across the stars, and we've embraced all these other races that we're now interbreeding, but what's left of the human race? And so they try to rally up the pro-human thing, and so they politically back on Earth, they get people to support the idea of pulling out of the Federation. Now, if the Federation was the founding member of if Earth was the founding member of the United Federation of Planets, what would happen? Well, they would cause a huge cascade of moral decay, in my opinion. So what I think Burnham's role is going to end up being in this new season is representing the ideal human. And she'll have to take that argument back to Earth with their closed walls. And I think the Federation may have collapsed or splintered because of Earth withdrawing. Just like today, we're in danger of that because of what's going on. Because, we're withdrawing, we're becoming inclusive. We're trying to let's separate and make sure that we know what's going on. It's just a theory, but it makes a lot of sense to me if you really think about it. I'm really interested if anybody has any thoughts about that. I'm looking at the chat right now. Anybody have any ideas on what I just said? Because if you think about it, just Star Trek has always said, this is what's going on today is a commentary into the future. It's not a political statement. It's just an observation. And I think that they can get away with that, but it makes sense to me because one of the things that was pointing out was you don't see certain races in the trailer. Kitwalski pointed out in his show, well, you don't see the Vulcans. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. They have a short amount of time to make this trailer. And what did they show in the trailer though? They showed Andorians and a few other Cardassian and whatever Morn's race is. I forget his race's name. But you see them as another faction wearing a specific uniform, which means they're not just some random pirates. They have a faction. Well, if Earth pulled out, why would they show her the flag? To show her what happened, Joe. To show her what happened after Earth pulled out. Perhaps that is what led to the devastation of the galaxy, because Earth chose to pull out. And that guy, by the way, she might not be on Earth. Keep that in mind in that trailer. Just because she's talking to someone that looks like a representative of the Federation, that could be anywhere. The Federation has spread out over 1,000 years. That could be some midway colony or starbase in the middle of the galaxy for all we know. We don't know that it's Earth just because it looks like a representative of the UFP. That could be the whole point. He could be talking to Burnham from Alpha Centauri for all we know. It's 1,000 years in the future almost. It could be anywhere. And he could be trying to point out to her that this is what's left. Earth pulled out. And Burnham, he might be trying to say to her, it would be great if you could go back and give a speech to Earth and get them to reorganize the Federation. Because that was the whole point. Who created the Federation? Who was the ones that rallied the Federation under the Romulan War? Earth. Archer. So if the humans pull out, now granted, there are humans across the galaxy, but going back to my original statement, what are humans in this time period? Phlox pointed it out to Archer, and so did Daniels. You look at a human, they have so much DNA, so much alien DNA in their genome that are they really human, pure human? That could be the entire argument about whether that matters. So it's just a theory I have. And I was talking to Kitwalski about that. And, so we don't know as far as that goes. And if any of you have any thoughts, I'm going to stay on for a couple of minutes and sort of talk about this. I just think it's worth talking about because when they come back for season 3 of Discovery, you have to remember that they're doing something we've never seen before. And people have been worried about them ruining canon and trying to diss everything that's come before it. I think it's actually the opposite. I think they're going to take what we've seen in the most recent iterations of Star Trek, which is mostly Enterprise. When Enterprise, even though it took place in the past, sort of similar, if you think about it, to Discovery, it saw the future beyond Voyager. It saw the future beyond Picard because they had visitors from the same century that we're going into. Daniels, the 31st century. We saw this Phlox do this, this autopsy on this guy that showed, he pointed out what was going on with the human race. And then Daniels says, are you human? More or less. What does that mean? All right. So C.W. Thompson asks, does anyone recall Daniels talk to Archer from aboard the Enterprise J during this Sphere Maker battle? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, CW. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So here's the thing. The exact time frame that Daniels comes from, he just said the 31st century. Now, 930 years from Discovery is anywhere between the 31st and this 32nd century. So the question is, did Daniels do everything he did before the events of this new season of Discovery, or at the same time, and that group he's part of, that time group, are apart from all the remaining factions? I kind of think that they're before. I think that Daniels' time period might be in the early 31st century, and that what we're going to see is the latter half of the 31st century, like close to the 32nd century, which could be 500 years for all we know, difference. And something happened. And like I said, all it takes is for one thing. If you look at how many stars are left in the flag, if Earth pulled out and they were the founding member of the Federation, it wouldn't take a lot for the rest of them to say, well, fuck it. If Earth's going to leave and they founded it, why are we still here? And start having more of an excuse to start breaking apart and forming their own thing and making the Federation a mere shadow of what it used to be. And you see this one person I showed you guys that a lot of people think is a current type of Federation type person where it looks like he's trying to sabotage something in the access corridors of Discovery. Now, of course, they only showed you so much in this trailer, but it seems interesting that the imagery you see is very telling. And a lot of people have picked it apart, like Kitwalski, Trek Sphere, and Trek Lore. And I'm looking at Lore Reloaded, and I'm going, you know what? It's pretty worth looking at. So I don't know. But anyways, Babylon 5 has done this similar story way long ago, but I don't think anybody's ripping each other off, because if you think about it, like sci-fi can only explore so many things without sort of stepping on each other's toes a little bit. Is how you take that idea and you turn it around. Like in Babylon 5, the Nice Watch was all about the more they started leaning towards an alliance between these different worlds, Earth wanted to make sure, like, wait a minute, and then racism came into play. And this was years before this. And they were saying, like, we need to be Earth first, humans, sort of make sure we remember who we are before we start intermixing with all these other alien races. Well, I think that's a natural and realistic social, cultural fear. And I think it makes a lot of sense for Discovery to approach this based on what's going on in the world right now. And again, it's not anything to comment on Trump or his administration. I'm simply commenting on the facts, what has happened out of that administration. It doesn't matter whether it was Trump, Obama, or anybody else. Star Trek has always made a commentary out of what's happening, not about blaming anybody. And the truth is that it is a fact. We have pulled away from the UN. We have talked about making a wall in the political landscape, and that's just a fact. History will remember that. Whether it happens or stays that way doesn't matter. It's a fact as of right now. And back in the 60s and back in the 80s with TNG, TNG talked about the whole terrorist thing with the Irish and the IRA, and they talked about that. They talked about a lot of things that are that at the time were relevant, and they sort of just took that and made it a point. And that's what I think that's what they're doing right now. I could be wrong, but let me know what you guys think. Comment on it in this video, in the comments, even after I get done. And what I'm going to do is the next time we do our next episode, we're going to take your comments and just kind of take a segment and say, what'd you guys think, and kind of talk about it. All right. So I just want to throw this out there. And this is a new segment I'm going to call I Have a Theory. If I come up with something that, whether just me or a couple of people, and we want to talk about this and it's worth talking about, I'm going to just throw this out there for a couple of minutes. So everybody have a good night, and if you have anything that you want to comment on or add to this discussion, I will make sure to look at all the comments before the next show, and I will kind of pile them up, and we will talk about it in a segment of the next show. And just to remind everybody, we are doing a Mandalorian after show starting later this week. We don't know yet whether it's going to be a separate stream the same day or if it's going to be split up. It'll definitely be Friday. And I want you guys to know, if you watch that show, and there will be disclaimers, it's going to be assumed that you have seen the episode. If you haven't seen the episode, don't watch it because we're going to spoil it. But it's only an hour show. So anyways, I want to thank you guys for joining me. And just comment below, guys. I think this is worth talking about. Have a good night.